Welcome back to AnchorPoint. Good evening. Our top story today presents a deeply unsettling report detailing the deaths of Ukrainian prisoners of war in Russian custody. An investigation by the Associated Press, drawing on autopsy results, accounts from former POWs, and findings from human rights organizations, reveals a pattern of severe abuse and neglect within Russian detention facilities. According to the AP, more than 200 Ukrainian soldiers have died while imprisoned in Russia since the full-scale invasion began 3 years ago. This investigation points to abuse inside Russian prisons as a likely contributing factor in many of these deaths. The report highlights the case of Serhii Hryhoriev, a Ukrainian soldier captured in 2022. His family clung to hope, believing he would be safe under international law, which obligates Russia to protect prisoners of war. Yet, Hryhoriev ultimately returned home in a body bag. His Russian death certificate stated the 59-year-old died of a stroke. However, a Ukrainian autopsy, along with testimony from a former POW detained with him, painted a drastically different picture, suggesting he died from violence and medical neglect. The Ukrainian autopsy indicated he bled to death following blunt force trauma to the abdomen that damaged his spleen. This case, according to officials from human rights groups, the UN, and the Ukrainian government, is part of broader evidence that Russia is systematically brutalizing captured soldiers. Ukrainian medical examiners performing autopsies on repatriated bodies have frequently found signs of severe physical abuse, malnutrition, and untreated medical conditions that, under humane conditions, would likely not have been fatal. Evidence includes findings of beatings, electrocution, extreme emaciation, gangrene, and illnesses such as tuberculosis and pneumonia, even among younger soldiers. Eyewitness accounts corroborate these findings. Alexei Honcharov, a former POW who was detained with Hryhoriev, described systematic beatings at the Kamensk-Shakhtinsky Correctional Colony in southwest Russia. He stated, "Everyone got hit. No exceptions." Honcharov also reported suffering from months of chest pain and being denied medical care, with beatings sometimes occurring after pleas for help. He was diagnosed with tuberculosis upon his return to Ukraine, an ailment increasingly common among returning POWs. A 2024 UN report found that a staggering 95% of released Ukrainian POWs had endured systematic torture, describing methods including beatings, electric shocks, suffocation, and prolonged stress positions. The state of many repatriated bodies adds another layer to these grim findings. Forensic experts in Kyiv describe bodies of former POWs dressed in prison uniforms that are often mutilated and decomposed. In some cases, internal organs are missing, or injuries appear to have been obscured or removed. Ukrainian officials believe the mutilation and the holding of bodies until they are severely decomposed are deliberate attempts by Russia to conceal the true causes of death and the scale of the abuse. Russian authorities have not responded to requests for comment on these specific findings. They have previously made accusations of mistreatment of Russian POWs by Ukraine, allegations the UN has partially supported, though noting Ukraine's violations are far less common and severe than those attributed to Russia, and that abuse reportedly ceased once Russian prisoners were moved to official Ukrainian detention centers. The secrecy surrounding Ukrainian POWs in Russia is also a major concern. Amnesty International has criticized Russia for refusing to grant rights groups or health workers access to prisons, leaving families in the dark about their loved ones' whereabouts and condition for extended periods. Of the over 5,000 Ukrainian POWs returned through exchanges, autopsies on a sample of 21 whose families the AP interviewed revealed multiple deaths from heart failure, tuberculosis, pneumonia, infection, asphyxia, and a blunt force head wound. Forensic pathologists stated that cases like these, involving easily treatable conditions or injuries, suggest physical abuse and neglect contributed significantly to the deaths. The story of Serhii Hryhoriev's final days, as recounted by Honcharov, illustrates the lack of care. Despite his declining health, Hryhoriev was reportedly moved to a damp, cold isolation cell with no lighting, dying there about a month later. His family learned of his death more than 6 months later. The Ukrainian autopsy challenging Russia's account of his death underscores the discrepancies seen by forensic experts. This news carries significant implications. First, on human rights and legal grounds. This report presents compelling evidence of widespread, systematic violations of international humanitarian law, specifically the Third Geneva Convention concerning the treatment of prisoners of war. The documented torture, ill treatment, lack of medical care, secrecy, and conflicting death reports are clear breaches. This strengthens the basis for potential war crimes charges against Russia at the International Criminal Court and other tribunals, which Ukraine intends to pursue. Politically, this report severely damages Russia's international standing and credibility. It reinforces the view among Western nations that the Russian regime operates with blatant disregard for international norms and human rights. It complicates any future negotiations or peace processes by highlighting Russia's alleged brutality and unwillingness to adhere to basic legal frameworks even for protected persons. For Ukraine, it emphasizes the nature of the adversary and serves to reinforce national unity and international support for accountability and continued resistance. Socially, the human cost is immense. For Ukrainian families, receiving loved ones back in body bags with evidence of torture is an unimaginable trauma. The uncertainty surrounding captured soldiers' fates creates immense psychological distress across Ukrainian society. Stories like Serhii Hryhoriev's become powerful, painful symbols of the conflict's brutality and fuel deep-seated anger and mistrust towards Russia. Militarily and strategically, the treatment of POWs impacts the conduct of the war. Knowledge of potential torture and death in captivity can reduce the likelihood of surrender, potentially causing soldiers to fight to the death. This affects battlefield dynamics and complicates prisoner exchanges, which are vital for both sides. Russia's actions could be interpreted as a form of psychological warfare or collective punishment. Economically, while indirect, there are costs. Caring for returned POWs suffering severe medical issues strains healthcare resources. The investigative work, including autopsies and evidence gathering for legal cases, requires significant resources. The loss of trained personnel also has a long-term economic impact. From a right-leaning perspective, this news, detailing the horrific deaths of Ukrainian prisoners of war in Russian custody, confirms what many already suspected: the Putin regime is fundamentally brutal, lawless, and operates outside the bounds of civilized behavior. This is not merely a human rights issue. It is a stark reminder of the true nature of the adversary the free world faces. International laws like the Geneva Conventions are designed to uphold a minimum standard of humanity even in conflict, a standard Russia has, time and again, demonstrated utter contempt for. The systematic torture, neglect, and apparent cover, UPS revealed by these autopsies are not random acts. They reflect a deliberate policy of cruelty aimed at breaking the spirit of captured soldiers and terrorizing the enemy population. This underscores the absolute necessity of standing firm against Russian aggression. There can be no moral equivalence drawn between the systematic barbarity documented in Russian prisons and the far less frequent and severe instances of mistreatment by Ukrainian forces reported by the UN, instances that, crucially, ceased in official detention centers. Russia's actions are systematic state-sponsored cruelty. Calls for immediate ceasefires or concessions to Russia in the face of such atrocities are misguided and dangerous. Negotiating with a regime that treats captured soldiers in this manner is akin to rewarding barbarism. A right-leaning stance emphasizes strength, deterrence, and the unwavering defense of principles. Therefore, the appropriate response to these findings is not appeasement, but a doubling down on support for Ukraine. This means providing Ukraine with the weapons and resources it needs to decisively defeat the Russian invasion and liberate its occupied territories, including those where these POWs are held. Furthermore, ensuring accountability for these war crimes is paramount. Documenting these atrocities, pursuing charges at the International Criminal Court, and imposing costs on the Russian regime for its actions are vital steps. This is not just about justice for the victims. It's about upholding the international order, fragile as it is,